I'll be perfectly honest with you, this time around, folks, we don't really have a Halloween episode in the works. It kind of snuck up on us. I don't really have a great idea for a spooky episode, and there are more topical things to talk about. So this year, as a special treat, we are going to pay Halloween lip service! Lip service! Mostly with this. Lip service.
Reportedly, John Cleese was very unhappy during the filming of one particular scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the one where he, as Lancelot, was retrieving a message on an arrow that had been embedded in his squire. Cleese was impatient because the film crew were trying to get the fog effects to look just right for the scene. Exasperated, Cleese would ask a question that has stuck with me for most of my life: is the fog funny? Monty Python and the Holy Grail is, if you somehow didn't know, an absurd comedy film full of fourth wall breaks, shattered realism, cinematic non sequiturs, and an ending that simply discards the entire story for no good reason other than the fact that it was pretty funny. Yet the filming of a scene was put on hold because the fog effects didn't wow anybody. While getting a good set together is important for any movie, no matter how silly it is, John Cleese had a point. They were shooting a comedy film and the crew was wasting too much time on something that served no comedic purpose, an incidental detail that was not so important as to disrupt the focus on the laughs. And I think it's high time we had a similar question ready for video games. Does it make the game more fun to play? This is the question I've asked of many games when incidental details have detracted from the experience and gotten in the way of gameplay over issues that just don't matter. In an age where people still perpetuate the lie that AAA video games are too expensive to make and that's why they need aggressive monetization, it's hard to view some of the headline-grabbing details making their way into games as necessary, or even desirable in an industry that overworks its developers and embraces crunch periods on an epidemic level. The latest game to raise these questions is, unsurprisingly, Red Dead Redemption 2. Now don't get me wrong, RDR2 is an amazing game, a jaw-dropping technical accomplishment and a new benchmark in production value. It's not worth ruining developers' lives over to come out as soon as it did though. It's also a game mired in controversy surrounding aforementioned crunch periods and Rockstar's history of alleged worker mistreatment. Also, some of the incredible detail in Red Dead not only distracts from the gameplay, it actively gets in the way of it. There's attention to detail and then there's obsession with detail. Rockstar has long since crossed into obsessed territory. Hunting animals in RDR2, for example, is a long and tedious chore that involves not just stealthily tracking animals, masking your protagonist's scent and ensuring the prey isn't startled, but also finding the right quality of animal. The animals themselves appear in quality levels from poor to pristine, and only the pristine ones are really worth a shit. Why they bothered having multiple levels when the other ones are pointless, it baffles me because it's pointless. It's one of those extra complications that seem thrust into the game for the sheer bloody sake of it. Anyway, you find a pristine animal after studying the animals you find, then you learn where its weak points are, then you fire and hit the weak point. Anything less than any of that and you'll damage the quality of the materials you harvest from said animal. After you've found a pristine animal and killed it in a way that preserves its perfect pelt, you must then go over to it and skin it, which involves a lengthy animation as every cut and yank of the fur is animated in luxurious detail, before bending over, picking the skin up, tucking it onto your arm in luxurious detail, then stowing the skin on the back of your horse in luxurious detail. And when I call these animations luxuriously detailed, I of course mean they're longer than they've ever needed to be. Speaking of the horse, it has a maximum whistle range and can't hear you if it's too far away. If it isn't too far away, it comes to you in real time after you call it, wherever it is, because that's realistic, I guess. I mean, it doesn't make the game more convenient, certainly doesn't make it more fun, but Rockstar has placed realism far above convenience or fun. The devil's in the details, and RDR2 is covered in little pitchfork-wielding pricks. Also, if you don't have anywhere to manually hitch the horse, hitching of course is luxuriously animated, it'll wander about and move away from you, and then you'll have to whistle for it again or run over to it because, hooray, realism! It's not fun. It's not convenient, but it's realistic and it's technically impressive, and that's way more important than a game being enjoyable. And of course the horse needs regular feeding, and it needs to be brushed regularly so it doesn't get dirty and have its health affected, and if you're distracted by the hundreds of distractions in the world, that meat you may have hunted will get rotten. Of course, not all of these details are inherently bad, but so many of them all together in one game just makes everything way more of a chore than it should be. I'm not one to favourably compare Assassin's Creed to anything often, but at least Ubisoft nailed one important element in its open world games, making sure the details don't get in the way of the fun. No, it's not particularly realistic that you can call for your horse in Assassin's Creed Odyssey and it spawns nearby wherever you are. It's not realistic that you can kill an animal and instantly harvest its materials just by being near them, not even needing to get off your horse. But you know what? It's quick. And it's simple, and it means you can focus on actually playing the game instead of watching the animations as a game studio essentially masturbates in front of you for its own pleasure. Red Dead is full of complications like those I've mentioned. You cannot, for example, feed your horse or change your outfit on horseback if said horse is moving too fast, so you need to stop your horse and do these things. Never mind the fact that changing said outfit will switch your clothes automatically in a split second. Considering you can do that, I don't think anybody would have taken points off the precious Metacritic score for a horse moving too fast to realistically pop a new pair of pants on. And it might not be realistic that a person would carry all their guns on their person, but having to manually re-equip weapons larger than a handgun every single time you want to use them, and having to do so from the horse every single time, is just a pain in the fucking ass. Rockstar's obsession with detail can actively hinder simple gameplay commands. For example, the animations for simply walking around the world are so luxurious that it takes a few steps to fully come to a halt, by which time that simple tin of canned strawberries you might want to pick up off a desk could move ever so slightly out of detection range, and you'll have to turn the protagonist around, but he might turn a bit too much because of the weightiness, so you nudge him here and there until he comes to a stop at just the right point. This is a classic Rockstar problem visible in several of their games, and if you played any of them in the past 15 years, you know damn well what I'm talking about. Protagonists in Rockstar games are notoriously fiddly to control, and it's not because the controls are necessarily bad, it's because said protagonists are overly animated. Realistically so, yes, but most games have diminished the realism in movement just enough to make them enjoyable to steer around, which is more important. Looting animations are a common problem too, not just for Rockstar, although RDR2 has a luxurious corpse looting animation. I'll never forget the looting animations for Metal Gear Survive, mostly because 50% of the game spent looking at them. That was predominantly a survival game, a game where you're expected to scavenge and loot whatever you can, so to have the same laborious animation play every time you looted those stupid dildo unicorn zombies was a premium waste of fuck-damned time. Far too often, the concept of realism boils down to making players wait around. Wait around for horses, wait around for repetitive animations, and sometimes literally just wait. One of the worst video games ever made, Shenmue of course, was praised for just how realistic it is, and how it featured a realistic daily schedule where shops open and close at set times, and people go on their set routines. Except, as ever, all that really translated to was making players wait around, waiting and waiting and waiting for set times in order to continue the story. Go to this building, wait for it to open, have 2 minutes of gameplay, get told to come back the next day, then wait and wait and wait and wait, and because it's unrealistic to go to sleep at any time of the day, you have to wait until a set time of night to go to bed, and you'll wake up at a set time of morning, so no matter how much time you cut, you're still waiting, waiting, waiting. Shenmue is utterly disrespectful of the player's time, and why? To fucking show off, that's why. Very much how Quantic Dream loves showing off at the expense of the player's time, lest we forget how titles like Heavy Rain and Beyond and Detroit drag and drag until anything interesting happens, because they make players manually perform chores by pulling the sticks and pressing the buttons and waggling the controllers to painstakingly go through every little motion of a simple act. You can't just press a fucking button to put dishes away in the kitchen. Oh no, you have to hold a button to pick up the plate and move a stick to lift the plate and move the stick again to move the plate and move it again to put it down. Absolutely none of this pointless shit makes the game more memorable or interesting interesting. It's just there for the developer to have a big dirty masturbate in front of you, the audience. And because without the overly intricate multiple motions to perform a simple task, a Quantic game would be about 10 minutes long. Sometimes the drive for realism goes so far it comes out the other end of a vortex and becomes completely unrealistic. The finest example being weapon durability in almost every game that features weapon durability. Yes, weapons degrade with prolonged use in real life, but a length of tempered metal doesn't shatter and fall apart after a matter of minutes. Someone in the comments is going to point out a particularly brittle metal here, and I'm not talking about those, you fucking pedants. Now, you know what game I'm going to highlight for this one, and I'm going to do it because it's fucking ridiculous that swords break apart like glass with the frequency they do in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Big fuck-off lengths of alleged steel managing to crumble into nothing after 20 swings. I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's no wonder Hyrule's in constant peril, given the fact they clearly forged their swords using twigs and bubblegum. You know what game got weapon and armor degradation the closest to right? Dark Souls. You know why? Because it's barely ever a fucking problem. And that's the way it should be, unless you want people to think the weapons in your game's world are fucking awful and smithed by idiots. While we're on the subject of Breath of the Wild, let us never forget how fucking imbecilic it is that the game's constant ever-inconvenient rainfall makes you slip while climbing in a game that's full of climbing. Not least for the fact that Nintendo felt it unrealistic to climb a rock face if it's wet, but not if it's literally fucking vertical. Either Link's Spider-Man, or he fucking isn't, Nintendo. Or is rain in Hyrule made of oil and soap? I mean, the swords are cardboard, so I guess it's not outside the realm of possibility. Like the Holy Grail Fog, game developers need to ask themselves, is this animation fun? Does this system make the experience better for the player? Or is it just self-indulgence on our part? Is it attention to detail or obsession with detail? And pretty much all the games I've just yelled at all have fantastic details that make their worlds come alive, so much so they didn't need to go as far as they did. Walking into a store in real time and buying items off the shelf in Red Dead, that's immersive and interesting and removes the need for so many menus. That's actually a cool bit of detail. Shenmue's innovative time system, clever fundamentally and would have been good if it wasn't forced into the player's experience with meaningless waiting, something Sega thankfully worked out for Shenmue 2 when it offered a way to speed things up. Enemies picking up discarded weapons and panicking when disarmed. Breath of the Wild is full of extra touches and flourishes outside of its bullshit, and those are great. As for Quantic Dream, well, I'll think of something. Detailed, lavishly produced games, they're all well and good and they can be incredibly impressive, but you can always have too much of a good thing, so much so that it all gets incredibly distasteful once a game goes way too far. Realism is nice, believability is good, details are lovely, but the best thing about games are that they're, you know, not real life. Fuck real life. So please, game developers, I ask you, consider whether what you're doing enhances the game, or if it's just Holy Grail Fog.
Now, we couldn't let this episode go by without mentioning the horse bulls. Of course not! We gotta talk about the horse bulls. Now, if you can count on anyone to be testicularly vigilant, it's your old pal, Jim fucking Sterling's son, and I kept a very close eye on those horse bulls in Red Dead Redemption 2, because, according to all the big headlines, those testicles would shrink. Those nads would contract in cold weather, and I can assure you, as a professional games reporter, I kept a very close eye on those horsey bollocks. And for all of my attention paid to those big hanging donkulars, I didn't see them contract. And I'm not saying they don't shrink in the cold weather, I'm sure they do. But the problem with all of these details, these myriad details in the games, is that many of them can get lost and only really exist for jokes on social media and headlines. Now, I'm sure they didn't take all that long to do. Apparently, according to what I heard on the grapevine, they were just thrown in on a lark and didn't really cost anything major in any way. But, I mean, what's the point? Just focus instead. If you've got time for a lark, you've got time to realise that maybe you don't need to make the horse come to a standstill to pop a new pair of pants on. It's just a thought from me to you as I muse on the world of horse testicles. Thank God for me!